Hey guys, and welcome to another video. My name is Damien Cooper, and today we're talking about 4K. Should you shoot in 4K? What are the pros and cons, and what's my opinion on it? More on that after the intro.
We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
If you would have asked me this question about 2 years ago, I would have always replied with yes, always shoot 4K, and if you can, shoot 6 or 8K. But after a couple of years in the industry, doing YouTube, doing client work, traveling, this answer might have changed a little. So before we really get into the topic, there's one thing I need to get off my mind, and that kind of annoys me from time to time, and I'm in a lot of filmmaking groups all over the internet, and there's always this one question. What kind of computer do I need to edit 4K? And let me tell you, 4K does not equal 4K. So obviously, when shooting 4K on your Sony a7 III, you won't get the same 4K when shooting, for example, on a Red Gemini or a Canon C700. There's all kinds of different 4K codecs. Some have a higher bitrate, some have a higher compression rate, and that obviously begs the question of what kind of 4K are you shooting and is that actually worth your workflow? So the next question we obviously need to answer is, what are you shooting for? Are you a daily vlogger? Is all your content going up on YouTube? Or do you only have high-paying clients that you shoot a video for every other month? And in order to kind of find a solution for every individual, let's break this down into a couple categories. And the first category we're talking about is file size. And this topic is probably one of the most important for us because, like I've already mentioned, just a couple of years ago we were shooting everything in 4K. We had the C200 and we were shooting in 4K RAW for our client work as well as for our YouTube channel. So especially when shooting for YouTube, we like to have access to most of our footage quick and easily because we use a lot of our old footage for B-roll for a lot of our YouTube videos. So having all of your old footage stored away in a backup drive somewhere on your shelf doesn't really cut it for us. And as most of you already know, we're shooting almost all of our content on Canon cameras. Most of it is shot in 1080p on the EOS R. But as we've tested the 1DX Mark III lately, and we shot our last model shoot Monday as well as our next model shoot Monday on the Canon 1DX in 4K, the file sizes are massively different. For example, when shooting a regular model shoot Monday on the Canon EOS R in 1080p, we usually shoot around 25 to 30 gigabytes of actual footage. With the 1DX Mark III, we actually shot around 700 gigabytes of footage for one model shoot Monday. Yeah, well, that's actually not true. I did combine the two model shoot Mondays, and that's how I came up with the 700 gigabytes. When in reality, it's more like 3 to 350 gigabytes per shoot, so pretty much 10 times the size. Yes, that includes the transcoded files into ProRes, and I'll talk about this in a minute, but still, even if we didn't have to transcode the files, it'll still be almost 10 times as much footage due to the bigger file sizes. So we're currently aiming to upload 3 YouTube videos a week, and one of our YouTube videos equals around 40 gigabytes per video. Let's say we were shooting this on the Canon 1DX Mark III with a 10-bit 4K codec, which is more than 5 times as big. So let's just say it's 5 times as big. So now we're actually looking at 200 gigabytes per YouTube video. That equals 600 gigabytes per week. That is completely insane because that is 2.4 terabytes a month. And like I've already said, we don't like to delete the footage after shooting it because we're using it for most of our B-roll and most of our YouTube videos. That really isn't an option for us. But when you're shooting on a Sony a7 III, for example, the 4K codec is actually smaller than the 1080p on our Canon EOS R. And that kind of leads to you having to decide 2 factors. What kind of codec are you shooting? And how many videos a week you're shooting or a month, and do you actually need to store that footage? But let me tell you one thing, if you shoot a lot of content and you really want to get the highest quality and you want to shoot 4K at a high bitrate all the time, for us it's definitely not worth it, because let me tell you, this codec and these file sizes will burn a hole into your pocket pretty quickly because hard drive has gotten cheaper over the years, but it's still not that cheap. And the next big thing we need to talk about is computing power. Again, this depends on the codec you have. Is it really compressed? Does it have a high bitrate or not? And what is the codec you're actually shooting with? Like I already mentioned, we were using the 1DX Mark III a lot, and I have a $4,000 MacBook Pro completely spec'd out to the max. And when it came to the 4K footage of the 1DX Mark III, the 5.5K RAW as well as the 4K 60 in H.265, my computer couldn't even play it back at all. And my computer plays back C200 RAW files fine, but when it came to the RAW of the 1DX Mark III or even the much more compressed H.265 codec, it really couldn't handle it. So that is one thing you obviously need to put into consideration. Can your computer handle the 4K that your camera produces? And again, there's all kind of different codecs. For example, the one on the Sony a7 III isn't really that hard for your computer to edit with, but even the one on the DJI Mavic or the 1DX Mark III that I was talking about earlier is really horrible to edit because it's usually a really compressed H.265 codec. Yes, of course, you can always transcode your files into a different format that is easier for your computer, like ProRes for example, and that's what we did when shooting with the 1DX Mark III. But not only does this add another step to your workflow, which makes it harder to get a fast turnaround, no, it only almost doubles the file size of your original files. And we're back to point number 1. And that brings us to point number 3. What are you actually shooting for, and where does your video actually end up? Are you shooting for YouTube or are you shooting for clients? And if so, where do they put the video afterwards? Or are you even shooting for the big screen? And yes, we're delivering in 4K, we're uploading to YouTube in 4K, even when shooting 1080p, but that has a different reason that I'll be talking about in a different video. But then again, our target audience are mostly other filmmakers. So they usually have pretty good computers, internet connections, and they usually have 4K monitors because that's what they're usually used to edit on. But if your audience or your client's audience isn't really other professional filmmakers, it kind of begs the question, where does your video actually end up being consumed on? Most people will watch the videos on their iPhone, which can display 4K, or maybe even on a MacBook in Safari, which for some weird reason can't display 4K on YouTube either, and even our 4K OLED HDR display that we are having in our living room that is hooked up to an Apple TV 4K cannot display 4K in the YouTube app. So not only did you just deliver in 4K, but most people can't even watch it in 4K. Or maybe your audience is in a country with really not the best internet, and then having to try to actually watch it in 4K could be a pain in the ass. Yes, I know, we always want to have the best looking footage because that is what we as the filmmaker actually thrive for. But in the long run, we are also running a business and we kind of make the decision of what is the best way to actually shoot and deliver our footage to our clients or our YouTube channel. So what's kind of our conclusion to the video? As of last year, we are mostly shooting 1080p. Unless the client really wants it to be shot in 4K, we're not really doing that. With the upcoming EOS R5, I'm honestly not 100% sure because the footage looks extremely great, especially the one that we already tested on the 1DX Mark III, but the downside when it comes to the file sizes, the workflow, and it being so hard on your computer, it kinda really begs the question if it's worth it. And for us, mostly it's not, and the 1080p out of our EOS R is really great. But if you have a different camera that shoots at a low bitrate and has a 4K codec that you can easily edit on your computer, this might be different for you. But we are shooting 1080p. So what is your workflow like? Are you only shooting 4K? And if so, how many videos a week or a month are you actually shooting and delivering? And are you deleting the files after? Let me know your workflow in the comments below. And I hope you liked this video. And if you did like the video, actually like the video, subscribe to our channel, and I hope to see you on the next one.